Normally when I do this kind of discussion, I'm doing it for 2 hours or 3 hours at a time because there's a lot of complications with the regulations that my state has passed and my agency has passed. So what I'm trying to do here this morning is focus on a couple of regulations and give you the basic places where we are right now. I also have some future things that I think are going to happen and I know are in process right now that you probably should be aware of. Let's talk first about regulations though. Even though I'm only going to discuss a couple of them this morning, you should be aware that there are other ones already in place. Some of these other ones may have some impact. I heard earlier that there might be some people who do refrigerated good movement here. Is that correct? Okay. If that's true, one of these rules, the TRU regulation that's been in place for quite some time, affects you. Currently, and this is just a real brief synopsis, currently the standard for anybody that's bringing a refrigeration system into the state of California, a reefer, is that the engine cannot be older than 7 years. If it's older than 7 years, it's probably illegal with the state of California regulation. The only way you get out of that is if it plugs in wherever you stop. Now that's what it is right now. The reason I'm even mentioning anything more about it is because there is an opportunity for anybody in that business right now to participate in the process for the next level of regulation. Because there is another standard that will be coming down the pike here probably in the next 3 to 5 years. It's called ETRU. I personally do not know how they're going to accomplish this because the requirements are going to be onerous on the locations where these refrigerated food stops are. But they're talking about electrifying practically everything, where you will not be allowed to run diesel fuel on a TRU when you're parked at any location. So if you make deliveries into California, that's a future thought. You need to be aware that's on the way. Okay. This morning, though, I want to focus on truck and bus and something called the Periodic Smoke Inspection Program, although that's probably the wrong name to apply to this group, but I'll give you both the names that we use. All right. First is truck and bus. And essentially, if you have a diesel vehicle over 14,000 pounds on road, commercial, and you're operating it in the state of California, it falls under this regulation. Now, I had a discussion with a nice young gentleman earlier this morning who has a 7,000-pound pickup truck. And that's obviously under 14,000 pounds, so it's not in this regulation. And he was confused about what I mean by 14,000 pounds or 7,000 pounds. When we look at that, we look at gross weight. So whatever the gross weight tag is on the inside driver's door jamb or wherever it is, that is what our enforcement officers are looking at. That's the very first piece of information they need. In fact, that piece of information and then the next one, which is the engine model year, are the two things that guide what your requirement is under this regulation. So it behooves you, I believe, to know what that information is as well. Because you will not know what your requirement is if you don't have those two basic pieces of information. There are some requirements for people who hire truckers. And there are requirements if you're going to sell a truck to somebody in the state of California. Actually, I don't know that it applies to somebody selling from Oregon to California. I'd have to double check on that. But I know that if I were to sell a truck, because I live in California, to anybody that was going to operate it in California, I have to include a disclosure on my sales document that says there's a rule. If I don't do that and that person gets a citation, then my agency actually has the authority to cite the person who hired them. That's not a good deal. You don't want to deal with that. So it's just a simple paragraph that we give you. It might be in your best interest to include that anyway if you have any idea that the equipment's going to be used in California. Sales, other than that, there is no restriction on sales. We don't restrict people from selling stuff anywhere in the state to anybody they want to for any amount. It's just that we want the people who are purchasing to know that there's a regulation. There are some exemptions, and this list right here is pretty common through most of our rules, but I wanted to focus on one particular part of this list that is being a problem child right now. Right, it's got a laser thingy on it. Let's see, is that right? Nope, that wasn't right. I just pushed something I shouldn't have pushed. Let's talk about the pickup truck while he gets that back up. So one of the exemptions deals with personal use pickup trucks. Now, can somebody in this audience tell me what is the deciding characteristic of a pickup truck that makes it a pickup truck? A pickup bed, absolutely. So if you look in the vehicle code, that's exactly what it says. It has to have, okay, all right, good. I won't press this one back here then, right? Very good. I almost brought my own because of that kind of thing. If it has a pickup bed and it's used for personal use, DMV in California considers it still to be a commercial vehicle. It's registered as a commercial vehicle. So when we look at it, if it's over 14,000 pounds diesel on road, it looks like a commercial truck to us. And therefore it's captured in the DMV registration thing and it falls under the regulation. If you have personal use pickups that have any connection with California DMV registration at all, and they're not used for commercial use, there is a completely separate reporting system that you should be aware of. It's called the Exempt Diesel Vehicle Reporting System, and it's specifically designed to capture vehicles that this rule collects and DMV will have an issue with, but they should be exempt. All right, so again, it's the Exempt Diesel Vehicle Reporting System. It's part of our Truck Stop website. Beyond that, these are pretty similar exemptions that we have in most of our regulations, so I just leave them there. You're going to give these people a copy of this thing, right? Okay, all right. Let's talk about the actual requirement. One of the reasons, or the main reason, that I told you earlier that you should know what the weight class of your vehicle is because this weight breaks everything down into one of two classes of vehicles. You're either light or heavy. The light vehicles are industry standard class 4, 5, or 6. Anything class 4, 5, or 6 is considered a light vehicle under this regulation. Anything class 7 or 8 is considered a heavy vehicle. Once you have that piece of information, you need the model year of your engine, and that's found on something called an emissions control label. Does anybody here know what an ECL is? Have one, seen one, used one, got the information from one? Nobody wants to admit they even know what it is. Okay, I understand that. I know some of you, probably most of you know what this is. This is not a state of California requirement, actually. This is a federal mandate that every vehicle, on-road diesel truck over 6,000 pounds since 1974 is supposed to have a label on the engine. And that label on the engine gives two pieces of information that are critical, one for you, one for us. The one for us that our inspectors look at is the model year of the engine. That is the only place that we can legally and legitimately find the model year of the engine. You can hand me registration documents all day long. I can't use those. You can tell me I've got this model year truck. I can't use that. I have to see it on the label. Okay? If the label is not there, then you just realized, and I just told you, what the single most common violation that our inspectors write every year is. It's for a missing or illegible emission control label. Last year alone, our inspectors wrote more than 7,000 citations in the state of California for that ticket alone. Okay? Seems ridiculous, but every time we bring vehicles in to inspect, at least 30 to 40% of them have labels we cannot read, or they are not there. The only place, and that stops our inspection. And if it stops our inspection, there's a citation. Okay. One last thing about the gross weight I want to make sure I cover here, because this has also come up, and that is that something called a glider kit. Are you all familiar with what that idea is? Okay, so glider kits are like Frankenstein trucks put together from a bunch of different components. You have companies that do just that. And when they do that, it is entirely possible that they modify the gross weight of the truck from what the chassis or the information that's labeled on the truck really is. Because you're pulling in components from different places. Whatever the finished gross weight is the one that we go with. But there has to be a tag with that somewhere where we can see it. I've seen them typically on the inside driver's door jambs where the manufacturers usually put them. But I've also seen them on the inside header on the driver's side. I've seen them on the dash on the driver's side. It doesn't matter where it is, but that's the number we go with. Okay. By the way, if you guys have a question, I get a little animated sometimes. In fact, I don't like standing behind a podium. The fact that we're streaming means I have to, okay? But I'd be over there talking to that gentleman and then that lady over there easily. If you have a question, stop me, okay? These are the basic two requirements, though. So first, we need your weight class and the model year of the engine. Once you have those two pieces of information, you can read these charts like anybody can read these charts. This is for the light trucks. The 4, 5, and 6. So I know I'm 14,001 up to and including 26,000 pounds gross weight. Now I know that, and I know my model year. The model year is on the left-hand side of this column, and on the right-hand side of the column is when this regulation says that vehicle must meet 2010 emission standards or it's not legal to drive in the state of California. How do you meet 2010 emission standards with a vehicle that was not built with a 2010 engine? Silence in the room.
2007.
What's that?
2007.
No, 2010 engine or newer. A 2000.
Can't do it or sell it out of state.
No. See, that's why I'm asking this, because that's a popular misconception. Both of these things are misconceptions. A 2007 or newer model year engine does have something called a diesel particulate filter on it, and that is what's required now for most vehicles. Putting a retrofit is not a 2007 engine. It cleans up an older engine, but it doesn't make it a 2007 engine. A 2010 engine actually has two components on it, reducing, well, at least two major components that reduce the pollutants. You've got the diesel particulate filter, which gets rid of all the particulate matter, and then you have something called a selective catalytic reduction system, which is another catalytic converter that uses the DEF fluid. You guys know what the DEF fluid is. You've seen these. You have to pour that into that extra tank. That is not for the filtration system. That is for a separate catalytic converter that comes after the filtration system. If you do not have both of those components in line and functioning, it is not a 2010 engine. And there is no retrofit available to take an engine that wasn't built to a 2010 standard to a 2010 standard. So the answer to my question is repower. The answer to my question is repower. How do you get there to repower? Has anybody tried to do this? Okay, I know the answer is no for almost everybody, because I'm going to tell you it's not an easy thing to do. It's not a cheap thing to do. I've known a bunch of mechanics that have done it to their own trucks, and it takes them 6 months, and it costs them $30,000 to $40,000 if they're doing it. Okay, if you bring it to a dealership, it starts at $70,000. Okay? Because you have to take the old engine out. You got to buy a 2010 compliant engine with all the components. You have to drop that into the chassis. You probably have to modify the chassis to get it to fit, because there's more stuff on those engines. They won't fit in most older chassis. Then you're going to change the drivetrain, because that's not going to function properly. Once you get all that together and the engine and everything is moving the vehicle, you're going to have to change the wiring harness, because that's all different. And let's say you get that all just bombs. It's all good. It's working great. It's still not a 2010 engine until the dash lights match the required dash lights for a 2010 vehicle. You know the mill lights that come on that tell you you're a dummy for letting the oil run out or something like that? Those are different in a 2010 engine vehicle. And it's not a 2010 compliant truck until all of that is together. That's why it's not that easy to do. That's why most people don't do it. The only people I know that do that for either the light or the heavy class are people that have extremely expensive chassis, where it makes sense to do the engine versus buy a whole new vehicle. Having said that, that's what the requirement is. So right now, let me see if I can get this right here. You've got 2003 and older light vehicles that timed out at the beginning of this year. That means if you have a 2003 model year engine, 2002, 2001, and 2000, or anything older than that, and you drive on the road in the state of California, most likely you're out of compliance. What are the options? Well, the options are replace, repower, retire, or drop into low use. You have one more option that's available because of where you are in relation to the state of California, and I'll go over that in just a minute. But those are the four basic options. And those aren't great options for most people. But this is what the rule requires. This is what we're writing tickets for when we find these vehicles not, The heavy vehicles have the same kind of chart. The only difference with the heavy vehicles is that before they get to the 2010 engine, they've been required to put retrofits on, just like that gentleman was talking about, a retrofit filter. And you can see the timeline right there. Right now, if you drive a vehicle in the state of California that's not in our reporting system and it doesn't have a filter, you've been out of compliance with this rule since 2014, because that was the last date at which somebody was supposed to put a retrofit on. If you had a 2007 truck that came with a 2007 engine and had a filter in it automatically, you already meet that standard, but you're still not done to the 2010 compliance. Okay. This surprised anybody? No? I know you've heard some stuff about this. Every time I teach a class or get in front of a group of people, there are confusing things being said all over the place about what these requirements are. That's why I'm trying to make sure everybody's got the same deal here. All right, so if you meet these two charts, the one I showed you a minute ago and this one, then you are in compliance with this rule. There is no reporting required. In fact, we don't want you to report. The only reason that you would put your information into our reporting system at the point that you're compliant is if you're looking for a certificate from us. Because there is a certificate, something called a certificate of reported compliance that you can print from our reporting system as long as you meet the terms of the regulation. Now, why would you want that certificate? Anybody have an idea? Customer, somebody hiring you. Remember I said I can write a ticket to somebody who's hired a person if the person doesn't check to see that they're compliant? That's what the certificate is for. That's why we created it. If you get into an enforcement action with our guys and gals, they're not even going to ask you for a certificate because that means nothing to them. We don't use the certificate to verify compliance. We look at what's in front of us. The certificate is to give to somebody who's hiring you for a job. That's all, its whole sole purpose, right? But again, the only way you can get that is to put your vehicle and your fleet, if it's coming into California, into this reporting system that I keep mentioning. All right, so flexibility options are when you absolutely have to report. Because here's the deal. If you're in the boxes I showed you, we verify the truck is in the box. If you are, you're compliant, we ask if we can put a little color-coded sticker on the passenger side window of your truck. You want to say yes to this, even though you don't like stickers all over your truck. I get that. You want to say yes to this one because this one tells us the next time you come through that we've already inspected you. It's color-coded by quarter. If we see one anytime in the current year, we don't inspect that truck again. We wait until the following year to do an inspection. So the color-coded sticker is good. We try and put it low enough so it doesn't block anybody's view, and it's just there for our inspectors to see. But other than that, you're gone, you're done, you go. We're good to go. If you're not inside those boxes, then the only choice we have to determine compliance is to use the reporting system. And the reporting system is where you're literally telling us what mechanism you're using to comply with this rule. You tell us that, as long as we can verify it, again, we'll put the sticker on and you're good. If we cannot verify it, that's when the citation happens. Okay. We did have a little bit of an issue that I'm going to briefly talk about. Because we modified, people complain, we modified this rule 3 times on purpose. People say you're moving the goalposts. I completely get that side of it. It makes it more complicated to understand. But I'll tell you what, every time we personally, the Air Resources Board modified this rule, we did it for the express purpose of adding more time and adding different methods for people to comply that were not in the rule prior to that. So it was making it hopefully more available for people to find ways to comply. The 4th time the modification was not because we wanted it done. It was modified because of a lawsuit. You think we get sued? How about to the tune of maybe 20 or 30 times a month? Okay. Most of the time it's people throwing things on the wall to see if they stick. Okay. And 99% of the time they get thrown out because they're specious just to hold the process up. This one stuck. This was LAWSON Trucking in conjunction with the California Trucking Association. They sued us on the last time we made modifications to the rule in 2014. And they sued us on this basis. They said, our members made the changes to their fleet that you required. We bought new trucks. We installed filters. We paid the money. And then you went and gave everybody that's competing with us another 3 years to do the exact same thing we already paid for. Competitive disadvantage. That's what they sued us on. I actually agree with that thought process. I also agreed with the extensions because I talk to people every day that are having trouble complying with this rule. Unfortunately for ARB, we lost this case. We appealed it, but we lost the appeal. The appeal came out in 2018, and there's not going to be any other appeal. So what this does, I thought I was going to do this short, but it's turned out to be long. What this does is it basically eliminates all the modifications we made in 2013 and 2014 and takes us back to 2010, the original 2010 rule, which can have some significant impact on people who are affected by this rule because it took some of the flexibility options away. Now, most of them finished up in 2018 anyway, but there are a few that did have some impact. The one that I want to talk about basically one of the more important ones I think is going to affect this group because I don't know how far you all go into California, if you go into California, but if you go into California and you stay mainly in the northern part of our state, the outlined red area on the top, you have another option. You have another option, and basically the rule allows you to only have a filter and never go to 2010 engines, as long as you never go beyond that red area. You stay in the red area to deliver whatever you're going to deliver, move whatever you're going to move, pick up whichever you're going to pick up, and then go back out wherever it was that you drove in from. You filter and you're done with the rule. That does require reporting. And I will tell you right now that if the truck is not already filtered, before you put it in the reporting system, you're not getting this option, because this option's already past the point where everybody was supposed to be filtered to get into it. So if you have an 07 engine truck, that's already got a filter on it. You could drop that into this provision today if you wanted to. Okay. There's no mileage limitation. There's no limit on the age of the vehicle per se, as long as it had a filter when you first, within the timeline, and you report it properly. Okay. This is called the low NOx option if any of you decide you want to try and use it. Okay. Any questions on this? This is a big deal, I think, for a lot of people that are on the border with us. Okay. All right, let's look at extended use of PM filters, and I don't know how much I want to talk about this, except to say one thing. If any of you in this room are purchasing a new piece of equipment, and by that a new truck to comply with our regulation in any way, shape, or form, I know for a fact that the delivery times on new trucks can be anywhere from 3 months to a year or more. And if you're purchasing a truck to comply with our rule, let's say you're going to do it this year, and you have a year delivery time, you're not going to get it by January 1st when it's required by the regulation. So there is a part of this regulation that stipulates, as long as you're in contract with a company to purchase the piece of equipment prior to September 1st before the compliance date. So if you're complying with January 1st, 2021, and you're in a contract to buy a new truck by September 1st, 2020, as long as you're in that contract and you have a 10% deposit down, you're in compliance. It has to be reported that way, but you're in compliance. Okay. This can be very useful for anybody that's getting into the market with new trucks. Let's talk low use real quick, because this is also another option, and it can be something that's expedient for your where you are. There has always been a low use option in this rule. Essentially, the option is that as long as you can keep a truck under 1,000 miles of use in the state of California, regardless of where else it goes, however many miles it goes elsewhere, it's exempt from the rule entirely. You don't have to filter, you don't have to update to 2010 emission standards, but you do have to report, and you do have to keep the truck under 1,000 miles, right? That 1,000 miles also it exempts out-of-state use, and it exempts emergency use. So if there is a declared emergency by a governor or another political head person, whatever you want to call them, in California, and you're doing work for that government entity for the emergency, any of the mileage to that emergency, at that emergency, and back home from that emergency is exempt from this 1,000-mile limitation. It has to be under a government contract for emergency services. If you want to see this in action, all you'd have to do is drive. Well, it'd take you 5 hours to get there or more, but you guys know where Paradise is, the Paradise fires? Everybody's probably heard of that at some point. That's been a year now or better since that happened. And there are probably 2,000 or 3,000 dump trucks driving in and out of that part of our state that are some of the oldest, dirtiest pieces of equipment I've ever seen in my life. But they're specifically being used to clean up the toxic mess. It's part of the emergency. They're completely exempt. All the miles are exempt. Okay. Anyway, this does require reporting. It requires a functioning odometer, and it requires you to put your mileage in your odometer readings every January. If you miss a January, you're done. The only way you get back in is if you provide documentation that you stayed under the miles, and that's not easy to do. Okay? If you have a truck that has never been in our system before, and you decide you want to put it into low use, you may be asked for documentation that that truck has stayed under the limit for the last couple of years. Otherwise, it could be a problem for us legally to put it into low use. Keep those things in mind. If you're in our reporting system and it says you need to contact truckers at arb.ca.gov, that's what's happening. They're trying to verify that you do meet the conditions necessary for that provision. All right, reporting. What's that? We do have a one-time use permit. I didn't put that in here, but that, since you brought it up, I will talk about that. Out-of-state fleets are able to use a 3-day pass, and it's not a mileage limitation, it's a timed limitation. So you can apply for and get a pass from us for a 3-day operation in the state of California. It's 1 per year per fleet. You can't do it a dozen times, but 1 per year per fleet. And it's an application process. The only thing I would suggest and tell you with respect to that is that you want to make sure that you, if at all possible, you plan that a little bit. Because I've had calls from people who say, I'm on my way to California, give me a 3-day pass. Or how do I get a 3-day pass? I don't know what to do with that. You're entering the state before the process can actually be handled. If you have any ability to, even a couple days in advance, we'll make it happen. It just has to have some notification. Okay? And that pass has to be with the truck that's driving in our state. Okay? You can't just have one at the home office back in Florida or Oregon or Washington or wherever it is. It has to be with the truck. Okay? All right. The reporting system can be located here on this webpage. This is our truck stop website. And in fact, if you have questions related to any of our regulations, before you call the 866 diesel line, or before you email me, or before you do anything, I'm going to ask you to go online and look at this website. This website was put together by the younger people in our agency that grow up with the internet, and it's actually much cleaner and much nicer than anything else we have, and much more direct. It's going to get a little cleaner even so. I don't know if you guys are dealing with this right now, but we've been hit with the ADA thing. Is anybody dealing with that right now? Oh, it's unbelievable. The state of California right now is being required. Every single agency, every single web page, every single document posted or handed out has to be ADA compliant. And by ADA compliant, that means for the visually impaired. So all of our websites are going to be getting real plain pretty soon. And all the PDFs as well. My presentation actually is going to have to be changed. But in any case, this is where I'd send you. That's the login for the truckers website and the reporting system. And then that's what the certificate looks like. Did you need to take a picture of that website? No? Okay. You want to back it up?
Yes.
Okay. I always go a little fast. I'm sorry. All right. That's the certificate. Now, the only way you get the certificate, as I was intimating a little while ago, is that you have to have your vehicle, your fleet, in the reporting system, the fleet that's going to be in California at any time in the reporting system. It has to be compliant with the regulation as you've reported it, and you have had to sign off on a legal disclaimer that says you're not lying to us, because we don't check every vehicle that's in the reporting system. You have to tell us that you're not lying to us. Once you tell us you're not lying to us, then we can allow you to print the certificate as many times as you want. You can't save it as a PDF, even though it is a PDF, because we've locked it. We had people who had the full version of Acrobat that were downloading it, modifying it, handing it out like candy. Okay, so that brings up another question. If you're hiring somebody to move stuff for you and they give you a fake certificate, are you at risk? No, the answer is no, because you did your due diligence. You asked for the certificate. If it obviously doesn't look anything like this, then yeah, you might be at risk. But if you have something that looks real and this person is giving it to you, and you know the fact that it means that they printed it from our reporting system, you've done the part that we've asked you to do as far as hiring a compliant driver. Okay, or owner. All right. I'm briefly going to talk about SB1 because this is what connects our truck and bus registration system to DMV registration. This was passed in 2017 under the cloak of darkness on a Friday before a holiday weekend, all that good stuff. All right. But what it does is it requires you starting this year to prove compliance to the truck and bus rule if you want to get registered to run the vehicle in the state of California. DMV, even if it's partial, you still have to prove compliance in order to get your registration. We're having a little hiccups right now with DMV. I don't know how DMV in Oregon is, but California's kind of messed up. You know, it's really difficult sometimes to work through, but, you know, we are working with them, and right now we think we've got it going pretty well as far as, you know, people being able to get registered if they're compliant and demonstrating their compliance. Okay. All right. There is one part of this SB1 legislation that you need to be aware of also because of a future regulation. So I get this question practically every time, and I know somebody's thinking it right now. What is the next step? What else is California crazy people going to do to you? Okay. And about a year ago, I would have said there is no next step. There's nothing. We haven't done anything. We're not going to do anything, because if you look at technology, diesel technology, from the standpoint of how far we can go to improve the emissions from a diesel engine, we're at it. We don't think the 2010 engine is going to go any, there's nothing that can go further than that, in our opinion. So then what is the next step? No. What's next beyond a 2010 diesel engine is not having a diesel engine, requiring electric or hybrid or battery operated or something of that nature. That is the direction California is going, I can tell you wholeheartedly, because every single body that has anything to do with equipment in the state of California is headed that direction. There's more funding right now going towards those programs than anything I've ever seen in the 30 years I've been working for the state of California. It's unbelievable to me, but that's where we're headed. What's that?
Testing show improvement?
Testing, you mean the ambient air quality standards or the testing of the air?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is another thing that you probably already know, and probably everybody in this room already knows this, but you have to be aware that everywhere in this country, your air is being monitored at all times. It's not a camera. We've got monitoring sites in every county of California, so we know exactly what the air is all the time. And the trends we're seeing are definitely getting better. They're not where we want them, okay? If you were to do a comparison between all the states in the United States and their air compared to California, California still wins the contest as far as dirty air. We have more than 8 or 9 of the top 10 worst places in the country to live for particulate matter pollution and ozone pollution. So that's why we're going that direction, because we still have a problem. I will also tell you that, to your question, that it's improved. The measurements that we've been taking for the last 30 or 40 or 50 years have demonstrated that from 1970 to, I think it's 1990, that 20-year period, we had a reduction of the pollutants load by more than 90% from what it was in 1970 to what it was in 1990. And we're better than that right now. Okay? The only thing that affects that negatively would be some massive event like the wildfires that we have every once in a while. Okay? But those are temporary things. Anyway, 5 minutes. I got 5 minutes.
What were the 2 engine options?
The 2 engines,
After the 2010?
after 2010, it's either hybrid electric, or full electric. And to put it on a date time frame, that regulation is just starting right now. They're going through the process of public notice, and they're looking at a time horizon of 2045. By 2045, I am willing to place money on it that you're not going to be driving in California with anything other than something that has that kind of functionality. Okay. All right, enough about that. I do want to talk, let's see, there's some contact information and another website. Take a picture real quick. This thing's running out of battery, I think, but that's all right. I want to talk briefly about this. This does not impact, this program, PSIP, does not impact Oregon truckers, but it's the exact same program that we use for inspection. So you need to know what it is and what the requirement is. Have you all heard of what an opacity test is? Okay, it goes by lots of names. Opacity test, smoke test, snap acceleration test, snap idle test, puff test, smog test for diesel vehicles, J1667. I've got 8 right there and I'm not done. They're all the same thing. It's the smoke test that our inspectors use to test vehicles that they see smoking. And I told you that the single commonest citation for our officers is a missing ECL, but the only reason we ever look at a vehicle is if we see it smoking. If it's not smoking and it's not an old truck, we let them go through. We don't even stop them. If it's smoking at all, We take a look at it and we measure how much smoke is coming out. Now, we used to have pretty high numbers that were allowed, 40 and 55% opacity. That's a lot. Anybody can see that and see it big, okay? But that is too much for a particulate matter truck, a particulate matter filter truck. What opacity should a truck put out that has a functioning high-level diesel particulate filter? Silence in the room again. Maybe it's a mic drop time. I can walk out. No, the opacity level that you should see coming from a particulate matter filter truck is 0, or as close to it as you can possibly imagine. 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0. Since filter trucks have been around since 2008, and we're 12 years past that, that happens to be a majority of the on-road trucks that we see. So the opacity levels that were allowed in this rule are no longer valid. We lowered them, and these are the new opacity levels. They were effective as of July 1st last year. What this states for most of you in this room is if you have a filtered truck that comes into our state and we inspect you, it better not put out anything more than 5% opacity. And 5% as just at where the human eye can start to see it. If you can see it, it's probably more than 5%. Okay? The only other thing I want to say about this is that if you have a truck that goes through this opacity test at any point and it puts out anywhere from 2% or more, you have something wrong with your filtration system. The filtration system should put out 0. Anything 2% or more, there's a crack in the filter. And by the way, we're also aware of the fact that there are chop shops, whatever you want to call them, all over our state, and I'm sure they're outside this state, that will, for $3,000 to $4,000, cut your filter and your def tank system out and reprogram your chips so the vehicles run without them. That's why this program exists, because those trucks are going to smoke like crazy. I don't care what you tell me, they're going to smoke like crazy. And as soon as we find a vehicle that has done that, you're talking the max penalty at that point. The max penalty for any citation equipment violation is a $10,000 per day. Okay, that's what we start at with somebody that's done that. That's willing, intentional, negligent. Whenever you hear those pieces of language at any time, you better figure that it's going to cost something, because that's what it is. Okay, I'm going to stop right there. Do we have any questions at all that I can answer real quick? I'll be around for a while when we take a break or whatever. I'm going to stay over here for a while, okay? All right, thank you.